The rain had just started when Daniel parked his rideshare car outside the tall glass tower downtown. It was late evening, and the city lights reflected across the wet pavement like scattered stars. Daniel glanced at the message on his phone. "Pick up Victoria Hale." He didn't know the name meant anything. To him, it was just another ride, another few dollars to help pay rent and school fees for his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Daniel adjusted the mirror, brushing a hand through his slightly messy hair. Being a single dad meant long days and even longer nights. After dropping Lily at school, he drove people around the city until late evening, then picked her up from his sister's house. Tonight had already been exhausting. The building doors opened, and a group of well-dressed people walked out, laughing loudly. Among them was a tall woman in a black designer coat. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she scanned the cars. Daniel rolled down the window slightly. "Victoria Hale?" he asked politely. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Yes," she replied, her voice cool and confident. She stepped closer and looked at the car, an older sedan that had clearly seen better days. Her lips curved into a faint smirk. "This is my ride." Daniel nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The people behind her, several coworkers, judging by their business attire, watched with amusement. Victoria leaned slightly toward one of the men beside her and said loudly enough for Daniel to hear, "Perfect, just what I needed tonight, a philosopher driver." The group laughed. Daniel pretended not to notice. She opened the door and slid into the back seat. "Take me to the Riverside Hotel," she said. "Of course." As they pulled away from the curb, Victoria glanced around the car with mild disdain. "You've been doing this long?" she asked. "A few years," Daniel replied calmly. "Let me guess," she continued, "life didn't go as planned." Daniel smiled faintly. "Life rarely does." Her coworkers had been walking toward their own cars, but two of them had stayed near the curb, still watching. Victoria rolled down the window and called out to them. "Hey, watch this." Daniel's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" he asked. Victoria leaned forward between the seats, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I made a bet with them," she said, "that I could ask my driver 10 questions about success, and he'd answer like some deep life guru." She laughed. "Don't worry, I'll tip you if you entertain me." Daniel stayed silent for a moment. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Finally, he said gently, "You can ask whatever you like." Victoria grinned. "Great." She pulled out her phone as if recording. "Question 1, she said dramatically. "What's the secret to success, Mr. Driver?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "Consistency," he said simply. Victoria rolled her eyes. "Boring answer." "Most real answers are." She smirked. "Okay then, Mr. Wise Man. Question 2, what's your biggest failure?" Daniel paused briefly before answering. "Losing my wife." Victoria blinked. For a moment, the joking tone in the car faded. "Oh," she said quietly. Then she quickly regained her mocking smile. "All right, heavy stuff. Next question, what's your biggest achievement?" Daniel thought for a second. "Raising my daughter." Victoria laughed again, but it sounded less confident this time. "That's not exactly a career achievement." "It is to me." She leaned back in her seat, studying him. Something about his calmness annoyed her. Most drivers either laughed nervously or tried too hard to impress her, but this man didn't seem embarrassed at all. "Final question," she said. "What would you do if you suddenly became a CEO tomorrow?" Daniel finally glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "I'd remember what it feels like to sit where you're sitting right now," he said. Victoria frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means power shouldn't make you forget kindness." The car went silent. For the first time that evening, Victoria didn't have a clever response. They reached the Riverside Hotel 10 minutes later. The building was glowing with lights. Expensive cars lined the entrance, and a large banner hung above the doors. Hale Industries Annual Leadership Gala. Daniel slowed the car. Victoria looked up at the banner and smiled proudly. "You can drop me here." Daniel nodded and parked near the entrance. As Victoria stepped out of the car, several executives approached her immediately. "Victoria, there you are," one of them said. Daniel realized then that she wasn't just another corporate employee. She was the Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, one of the most powerful business leaders in the city. She turned back toward the car window and pulled out her wallet. "Here," she said casually, handing him a few bills, "for playing along." Daniel accepted it politely. "Thank you." But before he could drive away, one of the executives glanced at him and frowned. "Wait," the man said. Daniel looked up. The executive studied his face carefully. "Daniel Carter." Daniel blinked in surprise. "Yes." The man's eyes widened. "Oh my God." Victoria turned. "What?" The executive laughed in disbelief. "You seriously don't know who this is?" Victoria crossed her arms. "Should I?" The man looked back at Daniel. "You're that Daniel Carter, right? The software architect." Daniel gave a small, uncomfortable smile. "Former." Victoria's expression slowly changed. "Wait, what?" The executive turned to her. 10 years ago, this guy built the core logistics system used by half the tech companies in this country. Victoria stared at Daniel. "That Daniel Carter." Daniel shrugged slightly. "I sold the company years ago." Victoria's confident posture faltered. "You sold it?" "Yes." "How much?" Daniel hesitated, but the executive answered for him. "Over 90 million." Victoria's jaw dropped. The rain continued falling around them. "You're a millionaire?" she asked. Daniel chuckled softly. "I was." "What happened?" He glanced at the hotel lights for a moment. "My wife got sick," he said quietly. "Cancer treatments, hospitals, I sold most of it." Victoria didn't speak. "After she passed," Daniel continued, "I didn't really feel like building another company. My daughter needed me more." The executive shook his head in amazement. "And this guy has been driving rideshare." Daniel smiled. "It gives me flexible hours." Victoria felt a sudden wave of embarrassment. Just 20 minutes ago, she had been mocking him for being a driver. Now the ground under her confidence seemed to crack. She looked at him again, this time differently. "You never mentioned any of this," she said. Daniel shrugged. "You never asked." The executive laughed. "Victoria, you just spent a car ride interrogating one of the most brilliant developers in the industry." Victoria suddenly felt very small. The rain softened into a drizzle as the hotel doors opened and more guests began arriving. Victoria stood there silently for a moment. Then she looked at Daniel. "Would you wait a minute?" Daniel nodded politely. She turned to the executive. "Give us a moment." The man stepped aside. Victoria walked closer to the driver's window. Her voice was no longer mocking. "I owe you an apology." Daniel shook his head gently. "It's fine." "No," she said firmly, "it's not." She sighed. "I invited you to that little question game to humiliate you in front of my coworkers." Daniel smiled faintly. "I figured." Victoria let out a breath. "And you handled it with more dignity than I probably would have." Daniel didn't respond. The hotel lights reflected in the rain between them. Finally, Victoria said quietly, "You said something earlier about power making people forget kindness." Daniel nodded. "I needed to hear that tonight." She looked back at the towering building behind her, the company she had spent years building. Somewhere along the way, she realized, success had turned into arrogance. She looked back at him. "Would you consider something crazy?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Come inside." He blinked. "What?" "I'm serious," she said. "Half the executives in that ballroom are struggling with logistics software problems right now." Daniel laughed. "I'm not dressed for a gala." "I don't care." She paused. "Just come talk to them." Daniel thought about it. Then he looked at the photo taped beside his dashboard, a smiling little girl with messy hair. "My daughter waiting for me," he said. Victoria nodded slowly. "Right." But before stepping away, she pulled out a business card and placed it on the dashboard. "If you ever decide to build something again, call me." Daniel glanced at the card. Then he smiled. "Maybe one day." Victoria stepped back toward the hotel entrance. But before she walked inside, she turned around once more. The old sedan was already pulling away into the rainy night. For the first time in years, the powerful CEO of Hale Industries stood silently on the steps of her own gala, thinking about a humble driver who had just reminded her what real success looked like.